Well, I'm so thrilled to be here. So let's get started. I know for some of you it's a late night, so we haven't got all evening. We need to get on with it. But what I want to share with you is what I've been working on recently. So I'm just going to move a few things out of the way from down here. And I want us to take us on a bit of a journey through one of my own papers. Now, this paper was written before AI. So this paper goes all the way back to 2013. So it's 12 years ago. And I was researching it for a couple of years before that. So it's a long time back, but it's a useful exercise because we can compare how I did things then and how you might do things now. But more than that, I want this to be a bit of a mentoring session for everybody. So I'm going to be talking about some quite personal perspectives on how I make papers and what I think about academia and how you might succeed within that realm. So we're going to weave in SciSpace. We're going to be talking about this paper, and we're going to be thinking about how you might construct and share your paper. So we've all stared at the blank page for hours, and you know what you want to say, but you don't know how to say it. And the majority of researchers I speak to say that writing is their biggest challenge. There's problems to overcome with the research. Of course, that's never easy, but often that's the most exciting bit and the bit you're passionate about and the bit you're trained in. We're rarely trained in writing. We're rarely trained to communicate effectively. So today I want us to share a bit of a roadmap and some practical tools to help you transform your work. Now let's get on to the stages of research. We've got the research itself on the left-hand side. We've got the medium, the means by which we share the research. Then we're trying to connect with an audience or a reader or a user. And then there's the application of that research. What does it mean? What are the consequences? Does it have a practical use? So we're often face a blockage at each stage. We face a blockage with the research, how to do it and what we're doing in the lab or with our methods. Then there's how to share it effectively. Often our research gets lost in that stage, or we even give up. And then we hope our audience or our reader or our user can understand what we're saying properly and make sense of it. And then does it even get to any use? So that's what we're trying to do. I mean, most papers are not even read. Most readers do not translate what they've read into something useful either. So you're left wondering sometimes, well, why are we doing it? What is the kind of point of what we're trying to do here? So I think we're looking for more than that. Sorry, I've just got a chat box opened up there. We're looking for our research to do more. And I think we're at a real significant moment, a bit of a threshold or a crossroads, where the academic paper has almost served its purpose, or at least it needs to be deployed in conjunction with other mediums in order to make it more effective, in order to have that breakthrough to our audience and to make it useful and have an impact. Now, not all papers have to be immediately useful. Not all research has to be transformed into a practical application. That's not what I'm saying, but there should be some use. Our research should make some impact in the world. Otherwise, what are we actually doing? So let's dig a bit deeper and start thinking about AI as well, which is one of the reasons we're all here as well. And I am concerned about AI. I'm concerned about my reputation, how I use it properly. I don't want to damage my credibility. I want to conduct my research properly and with care and diligence. I want to be a responsible researcher, a responsible academic, and a responsible author. But equally, I've always enjoyed technology and I want to use it. I don't want to be left behind. I don't want to be out of date and still using outmoded methods if I could work in a more effective way. So I like to put things to the test. I use my own research to test AI products and apps and how we might utilize them properly. So some of you will have seen my work on LinkedIn and in other places. If I write about AI, it's because I've used it. If I don't like a particular application, then I don't write about it. I happen to think SciSpace is very usable and effective, and that's why I'm happy to weave it into a talk as well, of course. So when Deepak and the SciSpace team asked me about this webinar, I saw it as a really good opportunity to discuss it with you, and also because these platforms are in their infancy, they're still being formed. So we live in an amazing time where we can shape these platforms. We can give feedback to SciSpace and to Deepak and his colleagues, and they can take it on board. Never before has that happened, so quickly. So on the Financial Times this morning, their central story was all about higher education and AI. So we have to be critical. We put them to the test. We conduct our investigations, but equally we recognise these potential exciting possibilities. And then on the right-hand side, we've got a wonderful book called The Slow Professor. So AI can accelerate the rate at which we write. It can accelerate the way in which we conduct literature reviews and so on. But I'm not suggesting for 1 minute we do more. I'm not suggesting we write more and more and more and more papers. No, what I'm suggesting is use the tools to write better ones. Use SciSpace and these other pieces of new technology to be a better researcher, not to accelerate production for its own sake. We don't want to do that. We're already inundated with papers that aren't making the impact. So let's do this properly, and let's really think about how we might become slow professors, and by that I mean careful, thought-provoking writers, people who make a difference in their world. So let's see what we can do. So the case study that I'm going to use today is the paper that I said from 2013 on the left-hand side. There are M dashes in there. There are all these signs of AI, but it wasn't written with AI because it didn't exist. So, you've got to be careful. People are quick to throw accusations out there, but it's not always like that. So this is what I call, at the time, an accidental paper. I wasn't intending to write it. It was a kind of spin-off project, but it became a really important part of my research approach and methodology. It's the type of paper that I think we all should be working on, our own private investigation. So if you're based in the laboratory, you can't just run your own little spin-off project, of course. So for those scholars, it might be more of a literature review paper or a summary paper or a state-of-the-art paper. It might be a paper that sets out your position in your discipline or field and sets out your ambitions. It's a thinking paper that's allied to your main research quests, but it's distinct from it. So I'm not trying to make extra work here. This is more about leisure and thinking time. It's a side project that keeps you up to date, passionate, interested, and well-read. And there are so many demands on our time. I'm not trying to add more, but what I'm saying is carve out 60 minutes per day for this kind of work. Have a think now and jot down an idea, what you've always wanted to do. So if you had time to work on a project, this is what you'd do. What are you really saving for another day, another time that will never come? Well, you need to allocate that time and make it part of your discipline. 60 minutes per day. It's crucially important that you start working on this. Now, people say they haven't got time, etc. Well, on average, we're spending 2 to 2.5 hours per day on social media. That's complete nonsense and a major distraction. All those little flicks through the screen add up to 30 minutes here, 45 minutes. You could be working on your dream project. You could be making a massive difference. I mean, for me, it was all about building physics, this idea of tropical architecture and its relationship to politics and political independence. And I felt there was something missing in that narrative. I, I was of the opinion that architecture was expressing a political idea in a colonial setting, and it was also expressing building physics and technology. So this hadn't really been written about in the history of architecture, and I knew I wanted to work on it and began pulling together all these different sources. There was something missing in the narrative, and that's what I wanted to work on. So for an hour a day, I allocated this prime time in the mornings. I'd get up a little bit earlier, do 30 minutes of reading, and then in the evening I'd write about it a little bit, just for half an hour. Just jotting down ideas, and over a year, you've built up an amazing set of work. It's 365 hours that you've accumulated, and you've got this wonderful set of information. So when I publish the paper, it looks like it's resolved and clear and beautifully written and composed, but behind it was a complete mess. The paper smooths over all of those problems, doesn't it? But this was a paper that was written just in 1 hour a day as a side project. That's 4% of your time. 1 hour a day is just 4% of the day. We can all do that. And then I also started to share my ideas publicly. I started to share my ideas on this blog. We didn't know what to call it. We'd say, well, this architecture is not linked to a particular style. This architecture is not linked to a particular place. It's not linked to a particular person or approach. It's kind of beyond national boundaries. So we just said, we'll call it transnational architecture. And we began to build in public. We began to jot down our ideas and share every month or so. And we started this blog in 2013 as well. And it's just grown. It's become an amazing resource. So the point I'm getting is, don't just focus on academic publications. Share, build in public. It's a common phrase now, but it wasn't then. People were saying, what's a blog? Why are you doing this? Why are you sharing your data? Why are you revealing the work in progress? Actually, it's more important. More people read this blog daily than they will ever read this paper. It's just a fact, because they can find it and it's accessible and it's interesting. I mean, look at that paper, look at the title. Tropical Architecture in the West Indies, from Military Advances and Tropical Medicine to Robert Gardner Medwin and the Networks of Tropical Medicine. It's a terrible title. It's my early attempts at search engine optimization by including every single keyword in the title. Very unattractive. Dreadful title, no hook, no interest. It's boring. I'm surprised anyone's read it. The abstract starts to get better. So the open sentence sets out the premise, sparks curiosity, and it challenges existing scholarship. Now, thankfully, this abstract does deliver, and we could host another seminar just on the abstract. So the point I'm making here is we can not only write papers, we shouldn't just be writing papers, we should be communicating in other ways. And platforms like SciSpace can really help us with that, with the paraphrasing tools, with their structure and approach. They can quickly help us to not add to our workload, but to produce it in other formats that can be shared. And I'm not talking about short form social media. I'm talking about blogs and serious essays that you can write about. Now, they're not peer reviewed. They're not subject to all of the academic scrutiny. We still need to do that. But why not share as we go along? Now, I know SciSpace have got a very exciting announcement coming up as well on a new AI agent. So it's almost a being, an avatar almost, that's going to be working alongside us and helping us, a research assistant. That's going to be super exciting to start sharing our work. So I just want to put that out there. This isn't purely about academic publications. We need to do more than that these days in academia. So how did I write the paper? Well, there are 4 sections, really. There are 4 elements that enabled me to pull together this narrative. It was a paper about a particular architect, so there was a sense of biography in there. There was the buildings themselves, which we could photograph and record, and buildings are kind of texts, you can read them in a way. There's the archival information, so drawings, photographs, trade journals, and other documentation. And then there's the existing literature that exists. So these 4 elements that I was gradually pulling together and that were orbiting the topic. And in addition to that, there was a geographical place. So I was dealing with a particular part of the world called the Caribbean. But back in the 1950s, the period that I am working on, it was known as the West Indies, and still is. Some parts were known as the British West Indies. Part of it are known as the Antilles. Then you've got all the various islands, Turks and Caicos, Barbados, various places, Jamestown, Georgetown, and countries that are forming this group. Some of the West Indies are in Central America, some are in South America. There's the West Indies Federation, all these different terms. There's the Gulf of Mexico, and we all know about the recent claims to change the name of that place. And it'll be similar for your study. There's all these different syntaxes and lexicons and keywords, not to mention people working in different languages. So back then I was having to search all of these key terms. I was having to go through all of the archives and other databases. I wasn't able to quickly search through these things, whereas we can do that now. So all of these different lexicons and terminology require their own search. They had their own database. It was a tedious process, as you can imagine. And then one day you'd find something in the archive that was particularly useful, or you'd get a reply to your correspondence, or you'd find a new photograph of a building you'd never even heard of before. So this is all going on, how to manage all of this data, how to construct the narrative. So it's not starting with one particular question. It's all of these things here that are happening simultaneously. There's my own natural curiosity. This is a project I just wanted to do. I would find certain archive caches that I would then go and research. A lot of these were located in the UK, so I could get to them quite easily. I was constantly thinking of how can I make this useful? Who will care about this research? What's the point of it? Is there a practical application beyond the history of a particular building, which I'll come to later? And then how are we trying to frame this into an argument? How can we turn it into a question? So I'm not sure I was looking for a gap, although there wasn't any literature on this particular topic. I didn't think, oh, where's the literature missing? That's not how I started. I was always being data-driven. I was always following the data. I think that's really important. And then we can redefine the questions later. We can rephrase the work to suit the data we get. So looking for a gap, I'm not sure that's always adequate for me, but some people view it that way. I view it through these other lenses. Right. So we start with the bibliography. That's often the best place to begin. How have other people done it? What does the existing set of literature look like? Now, you'll already have a bibliography. You will have been collecting bibliographies since your undergraduate days. Or a key book that you've been reading will also have an amazing bibliography in it. Or a journal article might have 80 references. So you're always harvesting these. You're always building up your own set of important literature that's key to you. And hopefully you're storing it in a bibliographic um, application, something like Zotero. And that's great because you can import that straight into SciSpace and begin to process it again. But what I'd like to draw your attention to as well is online bibliographies that already exist. So, for example, Oxford University Press have the Oxford bibliographies, and you can search by theme or lots of different disciplines, and it'll pull up an annotated bibliography. So it's not just a list of sources. Each source has a chapter that provides a summary statement on each of those texts. And these have all been compiled by people over the years, experts in those fields. In a way, AI is replacing these annotated bibliographies, and I'll reveal how it does that shortly. I'm sure we all use JSTOR already, but don't overlook these traditional forms of searching. WorldCat searches every library in the world pretty much. And then good old Google Scholar and Google Keywords. We should still use these, not only as a search engine, but for their email updates. So I get a weekly update on any web article that covers my keywords. I get a weekly update on my favorite and most important scholars who I follow. If someone cited their work or if they've published a new work, I get an email update. I also log my own name in there. So if anyone's referencing me or writing about me online, I get an update so I can respond to it quickly. I recommend you do the same. Follow the key scholars who you're interested in, get updates on their work. And if they publish something interesting, you know about it immediately. And then you can start to read it and process it. So this is a cyclical advancement. I love the poll that Deepak did at the beginning, like what stage of the research are you in? And a lot of you said you're in your early stage, some of you said you're at the end stage. But the thing is, we don't know. How do you know when you've left one stage and entered the other? Because it's really cyclical. So we want it to look like the middle band. We want it to look like literature review, then create your method based on that, collecting some data and write it up. But it's often more like the bottom one. You write a little bit, jot down some ideas, read, review. It's constantly flowing and new ideas are coming in. And it can be difficult to know when you've gathered enough data, when you've reached that saturation point, especially when you're starting the PhD journey and you might have 200 or more papers to read. You've really got to spend that time reading to get to the bottom of all that literature. It's very difficult. We need to be writing at the same time. And then we go through this kind of distillation process where we try to present it in this neat format, but it doesn't start like that. And forming the paper certainly doesn't look like that, especially in humanities and social sciences. It's much more messy and untidy, but this is what we're aiming for. So in each section of the paper, you want to make a contribution to knowledge. In the introduction, you want to set out why it's important and why we need to do this and the transformation it's going to have. Hopefully, your methods are explaining what you did, and your methodology is explaining why you did it that way. The results are obviously what we've found out, but it needs to be more than that. We need to get it into a discussion. So, what does it all mean? What's the significance? What needs to happen now as a result of what we've done? And how does that relate to the broader field? If you don't pan out, it's too narrow and no one will read it, and you're missing the opportunity for impact. It's exciting at each stage, and we can become quite comfortable operating in each section. I know some people who just work on methods. I know some people who are just obsessed with reading more and more and more. We have to bring the paper to fruition. The best paper is one that's finished and published. Now, I'm not suggesting we rush and are bombastic and aim to get to the end as quickly as possible. No, but don't hang on to it forever. You want to get it to that completion point So important. Also, if we don't pan out and talk about the arguments and what it means, then we're just remaining in the area of scholarship. We're just um, remaining in that butterfly collecting stage. It's easy just to gather sources, it's easy just to gather data and pin them to the board like this butterfly collection. We don't want to stop there. We need to get it to the completion point and to work out what it all means. So it's messy, it's iterative, it's creative. It has to be creative. The knowledge hasn't existed before, and it's your job to pull together the existing literature, your methodology, and your findings into a coherent narrative. That's what we're trying to do. It's difficult and it hurts your brain because it doesn't exist yet. So to make it exist, you're going to have to think really hard. And it's unlikely you're going to do that sat at the desk all day. You need to get outside, go for a walk, think, work in your notebook, and start to craft the argument and keep asking yourself, what does it all mean? What's my position here? What am I trying to do? There's a useful process in design called this iterative scrum process, where you have these various cyclical portions as you're gradually working towards the end product. And each scrum cycle revolves around testing, analyzing, feeding back, and then you gradually inch forward. But my thinking of the word scrum is on the rugby pitch. The scrum that's happening in the photo there. That's also what research is like. It's messy, it's dirty. You roughly know where the ball is and you roughly know what you're trying to do, but it's all collapsing in on itself. There's people pushing against you. Some people are on your side, but some people are also working against you, which often seems to happen, whether that's the funding bodies or the peer reviewers or even your own institution sometimes. It's not easy. It really isn't. And if you can get something published and peer reviewed and out there in a journal, it's a massive achievement. It really is a huge achievement. If you're publishing one paper a year, you're doing well, honestly. One quality piece of work, because you're going through this kind of quite violent assault on the mind, to get it to this stage if you're doing it properly. So it's super messy and iterative. And I would suggest that you need to keep moving towards these questions. So I had a theme, I had a topic, tropical architecture in the West Indies, but I had to rephrase it as a question. And that helped me to focus. And these questions were based on the data I was finding. I wasn't just plucking them out of thin air. And then finally, let's put the art into STEM. Let's get it into STEAM. By that, I mean start thinking about how you're going to communicate through diagrams, through drawings, timelines, through infographics, through beautifully crafted graphs and charts. You can do all that now through AI and through other software. You don't need to be a graphic designer now to make beautiful things. And if you're communicating through drawings and diagrams and maps and timelines and so on, that's helping your reader to understand the work. That's closing the gap between your research and the impact it's going to make. So, what you want to work towards when you can get out of the scrum are 3 sentences. What's my problem? What's my big question here? What's my approach and my key findings? And why does it matter? That's also a template for your abstract. If you can't write down those 3 questions yet, don't panic. It just means we need to work towards resolving it. So, why machine learning? Everyone has a certain preconception of AI, artificial intelligence, especially in universities. So if you describe it as machine learning, it seems to soften the blow, and people are a bit more receptive to it. So why do we want to use AI? Obviously, speed. We can cut through some laborious and boring tasks more quickly. 7 million papers published last year or thereabouts. How can we cut through the noise? Language difficulties. I'm only searching in English language terms. You can now use AI to search across multiple languages. So in my own field, people are writing in Spanish, French, Portuguese. It'd be useful for me to have quick and ready access to those papers before I do a full translation and spend all that time. A rough and ready translation is often adequate for what I want. And equally, if English isn't your first language, well, it's incredibly useful to read something in your mother tongue to grasp the basics of it before you invest the time to study the paper in more detail. We can reach out to the network more easily. So once we know who a scholar is, AI helps us to follow them more readily and to even reach out to them and to maybe start a collaboration with them. We can work beyond our areas of expertise. So in the example I've just been sharing about the West Indies and the Caribbean, I don't know anything about, or I didn't know anything about the West Indies and the Caribbean when I started that paper. I knew about tropical architecture, but I didn't know about that particular context. So AI can really help us get a good basic understanding of research that's happening alongside our field or allied to it. It can help us to understand something which we need a bit of knowledge about before we go into it in more depth, especially if we're transitioning or pivoting into something new. And we can use different kinds of AI. We can do the deep searches, we can do the more surface level ones, which are quicker and give us enough detail for what we require at that moment. So let's get into SciSpace. And I know half of you are using this already, which is wonderful. So I plugged in some key search words based on the article I'd already published 13 years ago. And obviously new papers have been published since then, many which I didn't know about. So SciSpace can search these various databases. It doesn't search everything. We know that. No database can or ever will, probably. So you have to plug in different areas, different keywords. It's going to give you a good variety and some serious results, I found, depending on the quality of your input. So it pulls up various papers, and then we can start to delve into them. There might be a PDF available, there may not. It will give you the too long didn't read, it will give you the abstract, and it will give you enough information, hopefully, for you to judge if this is worth reading in more detail. Then it can tell you who has subsequently cited that paper. So it gives you an indication of what followed afterwards. It can show you the impact that paper's had. So that's different from assessing the findings. This doesn't tell you anything about the quality or the findings of the paper. It just tells you how it's been received. So citations is not always a significant metric, but it can be useful to show how frequently that paper's been picked up and what other kind of people are using it and why. So you can start to create this kind of map of who's working in that area. And of course, you can save the ones that are relevant into a folder, which I'll talk about in a moment. And then we can look backwards. We can look at the papers that article has cited itself. So that's really useful. It forms a kind of origin point or a starting point. So we can look back and we can see which papers it cited and then which papers went on to cite that one. And we can examine them both. So by just doing this simple search, we're building up a vast array of papers, information, and associated reading. It's completely overwhelming. You might have 200 references on the go when you're working on your PhD. And you can add these to the folders in SciSpace so that they don't get lost, and you can close down the 50 browser tabs that you've got open and that you're never going to read. And start this systematic reading. And the way you can do that is by using SciSpace column layout. So you can arrange various headings and it provides digestible set of information for each one. So on the left-hand column, we've got the paper. Here's one published in Spanish, which I can't understand very well. And then with the columns, we can follow on. We can read the paper's insights. We can look at its major results, methods, and there's about 20 other things you can bring in or you can add your own. So why do we want to do this? Well, it's an aid to our understanding, but more importantly, it's a springboard to developing your own ideas and extending some of the concepts in these papers. And if it's useful, you might want to cite them. So we can quickly discern which papers are going to be useful to us and which are not, or the ones which we might just want to include within a much larger body of our literature review. So we might say in 2023, the following papers are all published on this topic and cover a similar amount of research or whatever it is. So this is really important. And it's also important because it's introducing names into your head as well. You might meet this person at a conference next year. You might come across their paper, or you might come across them giving a talk, and you can reach out to them and say, "Oh, I've read your paper that was published here," and you've got something to talk to them about. So it's really important, especially cross language. And you're going to use all these bits of information, hopefully, from the good ones, to create a review paper, to create your own literature review. So I would recommend you start initially thinking chronologically and also thinking thematically. So what was happening and when, and then how were these groups or bodies of knowledge or clusters being formed that would advance the field? So we're not just listing the findings in the authors. We're not just building a bibliography. We're building an annotated bibliography now. We're creating our own bibliography plus notes, plus comments, plus these special insights. So this is all about searching for new papers and understanding them. But we've also got our own collection. We've also got our old bibliography. We've also got our Mendeley and Zotero and EndNote libraries. I'm sure they're packed full of interesting papers as well, but we can reintroduce them into SciSpace and go through them again. Because if I was to reread some of the papers now again that I was reading in 2013, I'm sure I would have a different reading of them. And SciSpace can help me to do that quickly without having to reread every single article back from that time. I might want to go over that topic again and pursue another angle. SciSpace will help me to do that very quickly with the material I've already read. It'll just give me a refresher. Oh yeah, I'd forgotten about that. So the old methods were very clumsy, time intensive. And people are saying AI doesn't help with learning and all that stuff. Well, neither do these index card boxes that we used to use. That doesn't help with learning either. You had to flick through these boxes to find the authors. What if you'd forgotten the author's name? It's just dreadful. And even the even Google searches, they don't help with learning either. AI can actually help with learning if you do it properly, if you take it seriously. You still have to read, you still have to understand. It can help you to cobble together some text if you want, but that's no substitute for proper learning. And the old methods were not only time consuming and clumsy, but they didn't help you to format the references. So we have hundreds of silly referencing styles, don't we? We have hundreds of referencing styles. Why don't we just have ISO 690 referencing style? Just have 1 or 2 or 10 referencing style. AI can format it into whatever you want, whatever referencing style you want. It saves hours of work. And you multiply that across all the universities in the world. Thousands of hours must be being saved daily. I'm just doing that stupid task of moving a reference around to suit the journal referencing style. Ridiculous. But what I wanted to do was to say to SciSpace, okay, we know you're good at analyzing a journal article. Can you analyze something that hasn't been published, archive text, or a report, or a government policy document, something like that, or an archival finding aid? So I wanted to put that to the test as well. So before I share that, these are some of the things you can quickly do. You can organize all your data into folders, keep things neat and organized. Hopefully you're all collaborating with other people, and you can even share your library with other people. So that enables us to work with minimal friction. You can obviously get the summaries, which we've just been talking about. You can listen to papers as a podcast, which is, I think it's delightful. When I'm out walking my dog, sometimes just listen to a couple of podcasts that I've on a paper, and it gives a different way to think about it. I've really enjoyed that. And then obviously we've got stuff up here that we can do. We can put it into high quality if you need things in more depth, or turn that off just for the quick rough and ready overview. We can translate into English if we want. We can use AI to start to formulate some text if you want. It's not something that I want to do at the moment. And then we've got a little notepad, which is really important as well, and we'll go over that in a minute. So there's some of the key things that I think are super useful for us. But let's put SciSpace to the test. Can it handle some typed work? It's not even rotated the right way, just shoved in. And this is a archival finding aid. They're quite detailed. They can run to pages and pages covering all the data in an archive. Processed it no problem, and the summary came up to enable me to quickly look through, and I could locate the items I wanted to see in the archive on the right-hand side in the chat button. Again, I could have had that in another language as well. So there's hundreds of pages here. SciSpace quickly whizzes through and gives me the summary. Super detailed. This is analysis. This is data analysis now. This is helping me to get through information to find what I need quickly. I plugged in a government housing report on housing in the West Indies. Again, it's formatted funny. It's not been scanned properly. But the OCR, the ocular text recognition, handled that no problem. Quickly gave me a summary into the document, set out all of the important sections of this quite dense text. And these aren't fun to read. A very dry, very matter of fact report. So here it just quickly distilled what I wanted into a very usable output. The other areas that I think SciSpace is fantastic at is to integrate it into your web browser. So we're leaving SciSpace here, and we're just using a normal Chrome browser, and I've used the plugin. And you can see here I've just started to test a paper we did on building physics on thermal comfort. And there's some equations in this paper which are quite complicated, or certainly for me. So I was just able to highlight the bits I wanted a bit more information on. And then you click this Ask AI icon that appears once you've highlighted it and downloaded the plugin. And then the chat comes up to give you the definitions and to explain the concepts that you've just highlighted. That's wonderful. So this really reduces the friction. So in the old days, you'd have to download the paper, you get dead excited about it, really excited, then you download it, and then you save it in a folder, and you probably never go back to it, or you forget about it, and it becomes a waste. So there's always going to be concepts that you don't quite understand, or that you need a bit more help to develop the knowledge on. This is really good. I'm certainly going to keep this plugin to help me be a guide. Sorry, to be my guide and to help me understand the papers I'm reading. You can do more than that. you can highlight a section of the text. So some papers are they're quite detailed in one area, but they may cover other themes and topics, but you're not interested in that. So you don't want AI to pull up all papers related to the full topic. There might be one small segment of the paper that you're interested in, and you want to find other papers just on that segment. It can do that as well. So here I've just highlighted that section again on the mean radiant temperature, and it's pulled up other papers that are related just to that concept. So that's really handy, very fast, and again, reduces friction and will help increase your success rate of finding useful papers. Just a demo about the foreign language options. Sometimes it's difficult to understand complex topics and ideas and also to translate them into your own language. Of course, that's difficult. You're doing two things at once. You're understanding a hard topic and translating it. There's a lot of scope for misunderstanding there. There's a lot of scope for misinterpreting some important facts and getting the completely wrong idea about something. So why not help? Why not read it in your own mother tongue first? Of course, you can return to the original text and do the proper translation. But once you've grasped the concepts, once you know what the paper is actually trying to say, you've got a much better chance of interpreting it. And language is always complicated, isn't it? Things can mean different things at different times. So what do we do once we've got all this information? Well, we need to start writing right from the outset. You never just read because you'll forget it. You're always reading and writing, reading and writing. And you need a notebook. You know, my notebooks are always with me. Here I'm scribbling down ideas. It's full of amazing things that I'm interested in. But we also want to move beyond that. We need to type and we need to have some structure. And you can use the notebook in SciSpace and you can save that into your folder. You can put a prompt in first to say what kind of output it is. I think I said here I'm doing an essay on the tropical architecture theme, and I've used it to generate an outline. So it provides some useful headers and a structure. Now, is this a paper that I would submit to a journal? No, it's a notebook, and it's called a notebook for a reason. It's a pro forma that you can use to populate with your ideas. So it's called a notebook, but it looks more refined. It doesn't look like a real messy notebook. You can't doodle in it, you can't scribble, but it gives you that structure to help formulate your thoughts, citations, and ideas. So don't be deluded into thinking this is an article or a paper. It's still a notebook. It's a working document. So it's not a publishable article. It's something you're using to make sense of the mayhem, to distill and incubate your ideas. And you can cite from it. So it's fast, it reduces the friction, and it enables you, hopefully, to structure your thoughts. I find it hard just to get writing. Whereas if I had a structure, I can think, oh yeah, I can write about the historical context here. And I can begin to plug my ideas in, and then I'll start to cite some of the references. And before I know it, I'll have a nice paragraph all about that section. So I can write fast and then begin to edit slow. We always write fast and edit slow. You go over it again. What does that mean? What does this tell us? What's the significance of it? And this is how we shape and formulate our ideas. And you can go further. You can use the paraphraser tool. So there's a 500-word limit on this. So it's not going to paraphrase an entire book for you that you've written or an article. It's a segment. It's a fine tuner, and I found it to be quite good. So sometimes we have super excited ideas and we splurge and we write as fast as we can to get the idea onto paper. It's creative, it's fun, and it's essential to get things out of your brain space. Or you might write in a very crude and rough way at first, and then use Paraphraser to help you make sense of your own thoughts. It shouldn't be doing that for you. It's an aid that can help you to structure your thinking in a different set of words, language, and format. So I like to put it to the test. And in my example here on the left-hand pane, I used a 500-word mini biography on an architect. So the left-hand side is entirely my own work, and then the right-hand side is the paraphraser. I said, keep the variation the same. You can alter certain parameters if you want to. I was happy with the format and the composition, but I needed it to be shorter. So I reduced the length parameter. And the paraphrase chopped out 130 words. Normally, when I'm writing something, I re-edit it, and I'm aiming to cut 10% of the words of my own writing. I always try and edit the text and shrink it down by 10%, but still saying roughly the same thing. I always think you can make the writing sharper and more direct and bolder and to the point, remove superfluous words, sort out wordy sentences. You can make the same point, essentially saying the same thing with fewer words, and that's good and efficient writing. Whereas here, the word count has been reduced by 25%, and the text pretty much conveys the same content. So that would enable me to write a shorter piece, or if I wanted to, I've now got an extra 130 words that I could add. So it allows my text to cover more ground within the same word count. Now, would I simply submit the paraphrased version? No, that would be foolish. But I would copy and paste it back into Word and start the refining and editing again. I may not like everything. I may want to rephrase a sentence in a slightly different way. So I'm using it as a copy editor. The last thing you want is to lose your voice as a writer, but we can certainly be helped by an editor. All my writing, all the books I've written have all been improved by editors. There's no shame in that. I'm grateful to them, and I readily acknowledge their help. We all need help with writing. It's difficult. And you should do the same with this. If you use it, acknowledge the assistance. And it could be a great way to help you paraphrase your work to share with new audiences and other collaborators. And you can use the translate tool as well. So you could paraphrase it into a different language to help reach a new audience. So we're coming to the end, and I hope you've enjoyed my run through and discussion points. I think there's lots of appropriate uses for SciSpace, especially brainstorming, creating annotated bibliographies, sorting out the formats of references, looking for structural changes and paraphrasing, looking for suggestions and transitions, creating the notebook to structure your arguments and then to populate them. And you can even use it as well to create PowerPoint presentations and abstract videos, which are quite good fun and quite interesting to look at. So I would welcome any and all of your questions if you've got time to stay on. And whilst we're getting them ready, Deepak and the guys at SciSpace have kindly released some vouchers here as well. So scribble them down, or you can pick them up afterwards. But that's our treat for you to say thank you for coming to the seminar, and thank you so much for joining us.